What is up, y'all? My name is Josh Minyard. I'm a huge fan of movies, especially horror. If you're also a fan of horror, then you're probably very familiar with the Halloween series. For me, this was the series that got me into the genre to begin with, and that all started with John Carpenter's original Halloween. There were key moments in that film that had a huge impact on me, especially at such a young age. There are currently 12 Halloween movies, soon to be 13, multiple timelines where a large portion of movies are completely ignored, and even a timeline where every movie minus the first is ignored. It's kind of a total mess. Though I've had so much fun with these movies, I'd be lying if I said I didn't like some more than others, and I'd for sure be lying if I said I didn't hate an entry or two. Actually, 3 to be exact. Which brings us to this list. So it must be said, if you find yourself disagreeing with where I've got some of these movies ranked, just know this list is totally subjective.
Totally.
So with that said, let's get it going. Now, if you're a big fan of the Halloween movies, or even just a casual follower, this last place ranking should come as no surprise. Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 is, in my opinion, without a doubt, the worst entry in the franchise. And not surprisingly, that is a pretty popular opinion. This doesn't feel like a Halloween movie at all. With its bizarre, forced symbolism, pitch black cinematography, dumb as rocks storyline, and absolutely atrocious characters, I just don't know if I can even call this a movie. And speaking of the characters, I have some serious questions. Why is everyone white trash? Why is it important for us to know they're all fans of heavy metal? Why does every guy have long hair? Why can't there be one single normal person to identify with? I'll tell you why. Rob Zombie. So in a lot of horror and slasher films, when you have terrible characters all around, you end up cheering for the killer. You can't even do that here. Michael Myers is just a more villainous reflection of the people on screen. And really, this isn't Michael Myers. This is an angry guy who's 17 feet tall with really long hair. Like I said, this is not Halloween. It's just at all. Honestly, I should have made this list and not even included Rob Zombie's movies. That's how much I dislike them. To be fair, Rob Zombie's Halloween is not near as bad as the sequel. It does seem to resonate with fans more, and I would say it's a better film than what I've got in the number 10 spot, but I've always had a hard time with this movie. Thoroughly exploring the origins of Michael Myers and what makes him tick completely takes away from the scare factor. As H.P. Lovecraft said, the oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. Less is more, y'all. It's one of the main reasons great horror movies are great horror movies. Now, I can, however, appreciate Rob Zombie for trying something different. Also, Malcolm McDowell is much better here as Dr. Loomis than he was in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. But at the end of the day, this movie just doesn't work for me, and I have no desire to watch it again. I know what you Halloweeners are thinking. This is by far the worst Halloween movie. And if you were to use the IMDb rankings, you would be right. For me, what gives this entry some clout is the opening sequence at the mental institution. Regardless of how you feel about them deciding to kill off Laurie Strode, this is without a doubt the best part of the movie. And in my opinion, it's better than anything in the Rob Zombie Halloweens. Other than that, there's not much else to say about this movie because it's totally terrible.
Totally.
The ridiculous explanation for how Michael Myers survived Halloween H2O is inexcusable. He did not switch places with a paramedic and break his windpipe. Not a single person bought that garbage plot device. The livestream broadcast setting at the Myers house isn't necessarily horrid. I think it's the overall execution, characters, and everything else that makes this movie just basically terrible. And just one final gripe here, what is with Michael Myers' mask? It's the most feminine looking one in the series. Seriously, what's with those eyebrows? Here is where some controversy may come in. But you know what? That's what makes these lists so much fun. It's all subjective. But seriously, y'all, you can't really think this is one of the best Halloween movies. Okay, look, if you do, that's totally fine.
Totally.
But hear me out at least, and if you still think it's one of the best movies, then, well...
You need to have your head examined.
My biggest gripes of this movie are creative decisions, annoying characters, and really bad dialogue. Bear with me as I quote, "I got peanut butter on my penis." Also, do we really need to listen to two cops talk about their sandwich for a whole minute? Like, at least make them interesting. Give me the cops from Halloween 5 any day. Bigger issue I have with this movie is to eradicate Halloween 2 from the timeline makes this whole movie seem silly. You're telling me 17-year-old Laurie Strode survives a Halloween night where 3 of her friends were murdered and then spends 40 years not getting over it? Living in the same region where the killer is locked up in a mental institution? Waiting and preparing every day of her life for 40 years on the off chance that he escapes? Does that sound like a strong character? No, it doesn't. It sounds like someone who's very weak. At least in Halloween H2O, which includes an additional 10 murders and Myers' body never being found, by the way, at least there, Laurie gets on with her life. Sure, she changed her name and is still haunted by Myers, who wouldn't be? But she's not a hermit. She's the headmistress of a prestigious private school, raising her son, and is in a relatively normal relationship. This is far more believable. Oh, and it wasn't 40 years, it was only 20. And I have a strong hunch that if Myers didn't return in H2O, Laurie would have eventually fully moved on with her life. Another issue I have is with the film's climax. There are some cool moments with visual callbacks to the original, but they ultimately don't work for me. I prefer Michael Myers in the Halloween movies where he has the upper hand, we're scared of him, And it feels like, how do we survive? Not when he's the one that should be on alert from the protagonist. I get that's what they intended, and bravo for them for trying that, but it's just not scary. I also don't care for the annoying high school drama, especially not so late into the film's runtime. In the original, the high school drama was briefly introduced in the early going. But that makes sense. They were setting up the characters, and when it did pop up later, it was effectively used as a plot device to get Laurie to babysit Lindsay Wallace. This allowed Michael Myers to have his alone time with the young adults. In Halloween 2018, it's awkwardly forced and takes up way too much screen time, especially when its only intention is to get Allison without her phone. I wanted to like this entry, and while it does have its moments, I just find myself not wanting to watch this more than the 2 times I already have. Halloween Kills very well may be the corniest movie in the series. It is absolutely loaded with cringe-inducing moments and dialogue, just like the one before it.
Evil dies tonight!
I want to take his mask off and see the life leave his eyes.
The characters are without a doubt the stupidest you'll ever see, not just in the series, but likely in any movie altogether. You know what? On second thought, I'm not going to go that far. I also feel the social commentary falls on its face with the whole mob mentality thing, and I find it inconceivable in today's age that people wouldn't know what Michael Myers looked like. Yet this mob confuses some short, chubby, long-haired old guy as Michael, and they essentially murder him. Having said that, I find myself having more fun with this entry than Halloween 2018. If you go in with low expectations, turn off your brain, and view this as more of a horror comedy, you'll have some fun. This next spot was tough to rank, but coming in at number 7 is Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers, also known as Halloween 6. This entry gets a lot of crap from fans, but I feel it's slightly underrated. First, it's always great to have Dr. Loomis in a large role, and even with the Curse of Thorn mess, this entry at least feels like a Halloween. Michael Myers is also genuinely scary, and the hospital sanitarium climax is all kinds of intense. You feel like Myers could get you if you slowed for even a second. Paul Rudd as Tommy Doyle is another huge plus. He adds a very real element to this film, and he's a main reason you end up rooting for these characters. Not only to survive, but to save Jamie's baby, the last of the Myers bloodline. The kills are brutal, and it's nice to see genuine fear in the characters' eyes. It adds to the scare factor and makes you feel like the people on screen are behaving and reacting like you would in that situation. What repulses me the most about this film is the soundtrack. It's like they didn't trust the movie was scary enough on its own and had to force it in so many situations. I also have Karen Strode as my least favorite protagonist in the series, with the exception of Rob Zombie's Halloweens, of course. It's not that Marianne Hagen is a bad actress, but there's something about her I can't fully connect with. Actually, now that I think about it, other than Paul Rudd and Donald Pleasance, most of these characters kind of suck. The grandmother was likable, though. Having said all that, this is definitely not in the upper tier of Halloweens, but I do find myself having enough fun with it to warrant a middle ground position on this ranking. I also want to mention that this number 7 ranking includes the producer's cut. After hearing how much better it was than the theatrical version, I must say I was immensely disappointed. The only thing I preferred about it was that they used the original score. Also coming in near the middle is Halloween 3's Season of the Witch. So I hadn't seen this movie in over 2 decades, and recently went back and watched it, and I gotta say, it's really not that bad. This is of course the entry that has nothing to do with Michael Myers or Laurie Strode. After a young woman's father dies under strange circumstances, she joins forces with the doctor who is taking care of her father to investigate Silver Shamrock, makers of children's Halloween masks. From there they uncovered that Silver Shamrock is operated by an evil warlock, whose plan is to murder millions of children across the nation on Halloween night. This effectively will go into play by using witchcraft and the technology installed on each mask. It's a pretty unique storyline, though at the time wasn't a welcome change from the Michael Myers saga. And I'll just say it, I've never been a fan of Tom Atkins. He had a decent horror run in the early 80s, basically playing the exact same character. Additionally, he's always come off as very one-note for me. His facial expressions and what's happening behind his eyes is pretty much the exact same for the whole movie. It's not until the very end that he displays some genuine emotion. The movie's tone, soundtrack, and even the cinematography sometimes comes off as very campy. Let's be real, the movie is campy, and you know you're in for a B-movie within the first few minutes. I will say this, however, as cheesy as this movie is, like a lot of these films, it's still very fun to watch, especially if you like horror. There's some very standout moments. The one sticking out in my mind the most is the family testing scene. If this movie wasn't so campy, this would have been a lot harder to watch. I mean, they kill a kid. Like, brutally kill a kid. It's totally messed up.
Totally.
The car scene near the end is also highly effective, even if you know what's coming. And of course, the actual ending itself is the most disturbing part. You know, when Tom Atkins finally shows some emotion. All of these moments I very vividly remember from childhood, and it was a treat watching them again 20 years later. For that to stay with me so long says enough on its own. It's what I look for in horror movies, and the main reason this not-so-beloved entry finds itself relatively high on this list. Say what you will about Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, it's bad, I know. But it's also genuinely scary, and that has to count for something. We are ranking horror movies after all. The laundry chute scene is, in my opinion, the scariest scene in the entire franchise. The fact he's going after a little girl with a knife, stabbing and almost getting her, the claustrophobia, it's all so effective. And the coffin bit is nearly just as freaky. One of the major criticisms about this movie is Michael's mask. Sure, it looks a little weird, but I think it's a step up from the cheap-looking one from Halloween 4. And Myers is a monster in this movie. He has this presence and menace about him that actor Don Shanks portrayed so well, and his physicality definitely contributes to that. Let's just say he didn't need shoulder pads. Anytime Donald Pleasance is involved, a Halloween movie's value is only going to go up, no matter how poorly viewed an entry may be, and that's no exception here. Loomis is more vicious, determined, and almost villainous in his attempt to track down and kill Michael. He even uses the unwilling Jamie as bait. It's moments like these that make Halloween 5 more edgy and memorable than some of its counterparts. On the flip side, the characters can be very annoying. The tone is oddly inconsistent, and the introduction of the Man in Black and the early origins of the Thorn storyline seem messy and totally out of nowhere.
Totally.
It's also very frustrating watching a mute Jamie having psychic abilities that help pinpoint Michael's whereabouts. It's a silly plot device and one of the main things in this movie that makes you want to scream, and not in a good way. Overall, I can look past the numerous flaws of Halloween 5 and enjoy its dark tone, very scary moments, a terrifying Michael Myers, and as always, a determined and screen-stealing Dr. Loomis. Coming in at the 4 spot is Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. Right from the start, you can feel the passion in this film, and the opening transfer sequence does a great job of reintroducing us into the Michael Myers timeline after a 7-year gap from Halloween 2 and of course the Myers-less Halloween 3. The introduction of Jamie Lloyd as Laurie Strode's daughter was absolutely perfect. She's cute, vulnerable, and has great screen presence and chemistry with the mostly likable Rachel by her side. Rachel plays great as her surrogate sister, and it's the tie between the two that truly gives this film its emotional core and heart. Back is Dr. Loomis, who's doing what he does best in tracking down the elusive Michael Myers. And there's really not much else to say about him. He's one of the largest reasons these movies are so enjoyable, and his conviction in the role is once again on full display. The kills are mostly good, the atmosphere is solid as it definitely feels like Halloween, and the cinematography is excellent. Even the townsfolk get in on stopping Myers, and I felt this was much more realistically portrayed here than in the latest entry Halloween Kills. My biggest qualm with this movie is with the man himself, Michael Myers. He feels robotic, characterless in a way, and you know what I mean, more so than he should be. He doesn't feel like an emotionless killer. He feels more like an actor being told what to do. Maybe it's the shoulder pads and the crappy looking mask. Actually, that probably has a lot to do with it. It's just a bad visual. Interestingly enough, this is the same actor who portrayed Michael Myers in Halloween 6, and I thought he did a much better job there. I also don't care for the film's climax. I think it does a good job at the house, but once they leave the roof, I feel the quality begins to suffer some. The truck bit is just too unbelievable. From how Myers supposedly sneaks on and then the ensuing struggle. Seriously, he's taking out 3 guys, all that commotion and weight shifting and nobody notices. And of course, all 3 guys don't utter a single word of warning before going down. It's a cool sequence visually, but it feels tacky for the above mentioned reasons. I've also never been crazy about the shock ending where Jamie essentially turns into her evil uncle and kills her stepmom. Mostly though, I'm indifferent about it, and I assume audiences at the time were too, since they basically aborted that storyline for Halloween 5. Those nitpicks aside, Halloween 4 is fun and without a doubt one of the best and essential movies in the franchise, and one I always look forward to rewatching. Probably a bit of controversy here, as Halloween H2O is not exactly the most revered of the franchise. Despite being part of the 90s teen slasher phase, Halloween H2O delivers in many ways, and I believe this movie is vastly underrated. The opening sequence with Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Marion, the nurse from the first 2 Halloweens, is pure gold. The feeling of unease and mystery is immediately set. The opening kills are solid, and Michael Myers' entrance is perfect in its simplicity. Smartly ignoring Halloweens 3 through 6, H2O jumps right into Michael's purpose, locating his sister Laurie Strode. There's no need to explain where he's been the last 20 years. He just shows up, and it's perfect, as any exposition on his absence and whereabouts would have added absolutely nothing to the film. Simply, it's scarier not knowing. As mentioned before, I'm a much bigger fan of this storyline in regards to Laurie Strode. Though she's haunted by her past and has changed her name, she's making the most of her life and doing her best to raise her son John, played by Josh Hartnett. The emotional struggle between the two feels very honest and real, and is far more impactful than anything the new Halloweens are trying to do. But hey, that's only my opinion, and if yours is different, that's totally fine.
Totally.
LL Cool J is a total joy. He's just as fun here as the poetry-writing security guard as he is the God-fearing chef in Deep Blue Sea. He works so well in horror movies, and I wish we'd see more of him today. We've also got Janet Leigh, yes, that Janet Leigh, as Laurie's assistant, and as the real-life mother of Jamie Lee Curtis. Their brief on-screen time together is such a treat to watch. The teeny stuff doesn't bother me so much, as it's mostly believable, with the characters mostly likable. I think the established conflict between John and his mom gave us a good emotional core for us to attach to. If I care for John, I care for his close friends. It's also really cool to see him go from this...
He's dead. Michael Myers is dead.
...to this. For some context here, he has no reason to be worried about anything at this point in the movie. The truth is, as much as he's sick of his mom's baggage, he knows deep down there's a chance she's right. The film has plenty of great moments. The dumbwaiter scene is frightening, and though Michael doesn't feel as imposing in this film as he does in some of the others, He's definitely still effective, and a lot of that I would contribute to tight direction from Steve Miner. The climax is exciting, and Laurie's law-breaking final charade with Michael is highly enjoyable. Their final moments are powerful, and it's a satisfying conclusion watching her decapitate her brother. The movie's not perfect. It's the shortest in the series, and it sometimes doesn't feel like a true Halloween movie. I'd say the greatest contributors for that is the absence of Haddonfield and Dr. Loomis, as well as the scream-like tone encompassing the film. And of course, what would a Halloween movie be without a really corny line thrown in?
What do we do?
Try to live.
And here we are, the top 2 Halloween movies. Now this is likely where most of you are going to disagree with me, but what can I do? I gotta be honest and true to myself here. So, without further ado... Okay, enough of that. First off, I absolutely love John Carpenter's Halloween. There are so many elements that make this film not only great, but one of the best horror movies ever. The simplicity, the time period, the music, the birth of one of the most iconic movie monsters ever, the setting, as in this can happen anywhere, the outstanding performance from a young Jamie Lee Curtis, even the cinematography looks awesome on its $300,000 budget. This is also likely the best you'll ever see Michael Myers portrayed. As mentioned, simplicity is the key word here, and that encompasses all aspects of this film. It just works. To me, the moment that illustrates this the best is towards the end when Laurie begins to realize something strange is going on and decides to walk across the street. It's at this point we know we're about to hit the climax and she's about to come face to face with the boogeyman. It's that slow walk where the music perfectly echoes the dread and anticipation we're feeling. It's just a girl walking across the street from a movie that's 43 years old. Why is this still so impactful? Why does this moment bring horror tears to my eyes every time I experience it? It's because it's not just a girl walking across the street. It's much more than that, because ultimately it's what we've seen before and what we're about to see after that makes this moment so special. The climax is everything you could hope for and still stands up today in its chilling simplicity. There's that word again. But yeah, it's totally the best part of the movie.
Totally.
The slash, the fall down the stairs, the stalk down the stairs, the hide, the struggle, the savior, the defeat, the not so defeat. This isn't just an iconic horror film, it's an iconic film. Now, to get to the nitpicking, because we all know no movie is perfect. My biggest issue with this movie is an incident with Dr. Loomis. His performance is great, but one huge detail bothers me, and I can never quite shake it no matter what viewing I'm on. For someone so passionate and determined in locating Michael Myers, how is it that Dr. Loomis doesn't notice the parked car Myers stole until this late into the movie? He's literally been standing there, waiting outside the Myers house for God knows how long, and it's not until this point he thinks to turn around, check his surroundings. It just feels totally out of character.
Totally.
All right, I'm being really picky on this next one, and this is more of an observation than a gripe, but bear with me here.
I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face.
Now let's take a look at this. This looks like a kid who's actually showing some emotion. You can clearly see it on his face. It just doesn't add up, and it's probably only because I've seen this movie a million times I'm even mentioning this, but hey, it raises questions. Like, did this normal-looking family not realize something was off with their son in the 6 years of raising him? Did he just suddenly snap on a random Halloween night? Or was he just a normal kid that made a tragic mistake and was then emotionally and physically abused by his doctor for the next 15 years? All in all, minor issues aside, Halloween is a masterpiece and is going to take the top spot on just about everyone else's list. I'm going to go ahead and say I love Halloween 2 and I have absolutely no problem whatsoever putting this number 1 on my list. So let's cut to the chase. Want to know why it's number 1? One reason. It has the most iconic line in the franchise's history.
I've been trick-or-treated to death tonight.
You don't know what death is.
Okay, in all seriousness, that's like the movie's only flaw for me. And truth be told, the more I watch it, the more I can appreciate that cheese-infested moment. Halloween 2 immediately picks up where the first film left off, essentially making them both one big movie. It's more of the night he came home. This is a giant reason the film is so dear to my heart. As much as I love the first film, its slower-paced subtlety can only be rewatched so many times before I begin to crave the faster pace and more immediately gratifying Halloween 2. We're now dealing with a police and media frenzy, and townsfolk on hyper alert as to the whereabouts of mass killer Michael Myers. In the first film, other than Dr. Loomis, nobody was really concerned about him. And that's fine, that served its purpose and worked perfectly for the original. But in Halloween 2, Michael Myers has officially been brought into the limelight of notoriety. The body count is bigger, the kills are meaner and more elaborate, and though Michael does walk insanely slow, he can put the juice on when he needs to. The family link established between Laurie Strode and Michael Myers gives this film an added boost and adds more of a foundational storyline to the saga. Michael Myers isn't just on a relentless bloodbath. Well, he is, but he's also after his sister Laurie, which we learn around an hour into the film's runtime. It gives Michael more purpose, immediately making the film feel more primal, and retroactively also making the first film feel more primal, if you choose to view these two films as one and the same. The Haddonfield Memorial Hospital is the perfect setting and backdrop for this movie. There's always been something eerie about hospitals to begin with, and how empty and quiet this place is just adds to the fear. Outside in the streets or between houses, there's always the possibility to scamper away as you have that natural space to work with. Here at Haddonfield Memorial, its sheer size and numerous corridors make you feel trapped in a maze. It's dreadful, claustrophobic, and not to mention harder to escape. Simply put, the hospital is a character. It adds to the movie's suspense and terror, and it's one of the biggest reasons the climax is so stress-inducing. I guess it's no shock to say it's my favorite climax in the series, which breaks down into two separate chase scenes. Every time I watch the elevator bit, I'm at the edge of my seat and my heart is pounding. With the pulsating music, Laurie backing up with nowhere to run as Michael slowly creeps towards her, the door shutting on his scalpel just in the nick of time, I've essentially already had a heart attack, and it never seems to stop affecting me no matter how many times I've seen it. For me, it's the most memorable and emotionally heightened moment in the franchise. The second chase is equally impressive. The iconic final moments in the previously mentioned chase stick in my memory more than any other Halloween. It's primarily for these reasons that Halloween 2 is my favorite of them all, because at the end of the day, we don't choose why certain films stick with us more so than others. On paper, I will concede that John Carpenter's Halloween is the better film, but the one I always look forward to rewatching the most is Halloween 2. It has more striking moments that resonate with me visually and emotionally, the stakes feel higher, the kills are better, and truth be told, I just have more fun with this movie more so than any other in the franchise. That wraps it up for my Halloween rankings. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your rankings in the comments below. And last but not least, always remember,
everyone is entitled to one good scare.